Hello, hey, and hi, how are you? It's time for another video of the 100 Days of Making Comics challenge. Man, this challenge is already hard, and it's not even like a week into it, basically. But, I'm trying. If you're returning here from my last videos, that means that you have an idea, and you've got a few characters, or maybe you're just waiting for all of the advice first before you start doing anything. Either way, today I'm going to be talking about how to go about building a world, and all that entails. So like I said yesterday, world building is often done in tandem with character and plot creation, and they're all kind of tied together, and one will inform the other as much as the other informs the one, if that makes sense at all. And that's usually why it's good to kind of have your general idea at the very beginning so that you can kind of keep these all together, sort of spreading from the same stem. And much like in my character video, a lot of the general idea principles apply. That means putting out more ideas than you'll end up using and not always going with your first idea right away. Even if you do in the end up going right back to that original idea, at least you've looked down different paths. Now, of course, there are things that separate world building from character creation. Obviously, like characters are the ones that will be doing things in your world, and they change, they're very fluid. Worlds are a little less fluid, but still can change. And, plots are the things that happen in your world with your characters. So there you go. They have their differences, but they are, again, very much linked together. As such, the world that you build will facilitate your characters and plots. That's basically how it goes down. When I think about world building, it's very easy to start considering things in a more physical sense, like physical elements of your world. And these are definitely good to have on your list, especially if you're literally trying to make an entire world from your brain and turn it into a paper real world. Oh my god, what is that? Things to consider like geography, climate, flora, fauna, and to some extent like how magic system works. Those are all very physical elements of your world, and they're a very good place to start, but there's very, very much a limited scope to all of these things. The amount of time you spend world building, very little will be focused on your physical world. The most substantial part of world building will most likely exist in developing culture and how people relate to the world around them. Like the physical qualities of your world will only get you so far. Like the most unique aspects will come down to how the physical aspects then inform how people inhabiting the world relate to said physical aspects of your world. Being aware of how people exist in your world will really help you direct your thoughts, informing a world with plot and characters at its center, rather than making a story about the world itself, which is still something you could technically do, but most likely isn't the route you're going down. Also, if the world that you're building is our own world, like current world, or it's some sort of spin-off of our world, knowing culture is basically like the largest changes that you're going to be managing as far as any major world building aspects are going. Down another route here, for the most part, when you are world building, you aren't expected to build an entire world, even if you're making an epic scale Lord of the Rings type world. Instead, you are building the illusion of a world. To do this, you want to be intimately familiar with the aspects that will be focused on in your story, while having a more general knowledge of other more spread out aspects of your world. Like, you don't need to know down to the very last detail how everything in your world works if you're not going to be showing that in your story. So if you're using something in your world to generate plot, it needs explaining. It needs rules. Even if those rules at some point elude people within your world, you still need enough visible rules to create reliable setup and payoff. Like, the idea of a rule can sound really intense and super limiting and just a put off, but like, honestly, rules in your world in practice are a lot simpler, and they're way less in your face than you'd expect. Like, if you have a spooky mountain in your world, then nobody can get over, like no one's ever getting over that thing, that's a rule. The rule is no one gets over this mountain. So if suddenly someone gets over this mountain and everyone acts like it's no big deal, then a rule here has been broken. Like, unless you go on to explain why this particular person can get over the mountain with no problem, or everyone reacts to it in an amazing way and we find out a reason why this person could get over it. Like, unless you have those things, a rule's been broken. So you need to pay attention to your rules and make rules. It's okay if your world has gravity. It's okay. Like, it's not going to ruin your story. It can make it more interesting, in fact. Like, the constraints of your world will inform your culture, your character, your plots, everything. And it's a lot of fun. And, you know, when you have your spooky mountain, you start to think about how the culture would then be formed around this mountain. What would their reaction be if someone came down the mountain? Like, all of these things start to like culminate in interesting world building if you just keep digging deeper and explaining questions as they come up to yourself. Sometimes during the writing process, you'll come up to points where you realize there are opportunities to develop your world further. Like, world building doesn't end in your initial idea or even your initial outline. Like, maybe you find out like a character needs a punishment and you're thinking about putting them in prison because that's like your default. Your mind goes, oh, bad person. they broke a law, send them to prison. But oh wait, you've created a nomadic culture. Like, how do they deal with crime and punishment in your world? You need to challenge the default understandings of kind of your culture and shape things to better fit what you have created. So always kind of be challenging your initial thoughts and how you typically do things. And that's how you kind of get really interesting worlds. Like, I always like to develop my world like a little farther than I end up showing on the page, but I also don't want to exhaust myself and never end up starting my comic. So I like to focus on like elements that show up, dig into it, understand it a little more than I need to, and then stopping myself from going deep down into a world building pit of chaos that I can never escape. This is why I tend to start with characters more often than not before I actually dive into world building, because while my characters inevitably will change as I start to add more world building to my world, it's a lot easier to build a world to fit characters that I like rather than doing so the other way around, because I tend to be a lot more excited about characters than I am excited about worlds. So it's nice to just follow what I found most exciting, which is characters, and then put them in a place where they would fit, rather than trying to maybe find cool characters in a world that's a little harder to change, especially as you start building up rules. But I don't always do it that way. Sometimes I go the other way around. And, you know, maybe it's just me. And even then, the world keeps building and characters keep building as you edit and go along. But usually I can be like, okay, I want to have a vampire that runs a saloon. And then I start to build a world around it. Like, it gives me that direct starting point and lets me know what aspects of the world I need to write in order to start making the character I want to write work. So if I'm starting with a vampire saloon owner, I then start to think, like, how would this saloon even go about working? Like, why does it exist? Like, I ask questions maybe of like the physicality of the world first, because that'll inform a lot of stuff. And like my first thought would just be to go into like a deserty type setting, just because that's what saloon says to me. But if I want to challenge that, I might consider doing like a frozen desert, like an Arctic type Western world where I still got that desolate wasteland feel, but it's a little different. And maybe I can have that play into the vampire aspect a bit. Maybe it's an Arctic type world where like they have that long day and that long night. And during the long night, a whole bunch of people like kind of drift into town, like all sorts of unsavory sorts, you know, and they show up at the saloon and they stay around the area until sunup happens, where they go off and do their own thing. Like I could have a plot in there, and like I can think then kind of about the wider world, like why do people come to a saloon? Why would they want to do all this stuff? Maybe they just want to stay up all night. but like you have to think further than that, but that's like a good starting point. And then I kind of go deeper into like how my vampires work, because every vampire is going to be different. Every story has its own unique spin on vampires. Obviously, these ones have some sort of relation to the sun. Maybe they burn up in it, or maybe I want them to have some sort of different response to it. I don't know. I'd have to just consider it. Those kind of questions can get me going deeper and farther, and I start building out a interesting world just by seeing what works, what's interesting, and just trying different things and shaping up my vampire culture. I'm not actually writing a vampire Western story, guys. I'm writing a vampire story, which is why they're on my mind right now, but it's not Western. You guys can take my Western vampires if you want them. I'm probably not going to do it. And anyways, so I hope that was a good overview on world building. I'm a little tired today, so if you have any questions, make sure to ask them on the live stream or before the live stream. I'll try to answer all your questions on Saturday. And on Sunday, I'm going to finally be talking about how to make plots, which are like the basis of like story, right? So that's going to be exciting. We're still not going to talk about actually writing our stories quite yet. I always forget how long the actual like planning stage is for writing, like both when I'm talking about it here and when I was doing it. It took me months to like figure out what I was going to write. Such a pain, isn't it? But sometimes it just comes to you and you're like, why can't this just happen all the time? Man, stories are hard. I'm going to go edit this video because it's going to be late, because I'm already a minute late to post it. Man, it'll be great when it's posted. And I really need a nap. I can't believe I've only done 3 video topics and I'm already dead, guys. Someone save me. There's so many more days left. Oh, okay. Goodbye. See ya.